Hello, everyone. How are you doing tonight? Good, good, good. Are you guys enjoying HackSC so far? Yeah? Well, we are so excited that y'all are here for a Svelte workshop. Now, I'm kind of curious, how many of you have heard of Svelte before? Okay, about like 20% maybe?
Your hands really high.
Okay, 10%, 10%. Okay, so we have some Svelte fans here. But I know that for those of you that don't know Svelte, we have quite a bit of a show for you. It's going to be an awesome presentation. And I'd like to introduce to you our design team lead, Vivian, who is very passionate about Svelte and is so excited about this workshop. Please give a round of applause to Vivian.
Hi, everybody. Today I'm going to be talking about a topic that I've been very passionate about for a very long time, for like about a year. So we're just going to get started. My name is Vivian. As Phil mentioned, I'm the HackSC design team lead, but I also really love code. So I'm very interested in the intersection between design and code. Beyond that, I like fruits, and I'm also teaching this workshop today. So how many of you guys know just like HTML, CSS, a little bit of JavaScript? Raise your hands. Raise them like really high so that I can see that you're raising your hands. Okay, cool. So as you guys know, we can use these tools, so like markup language, styles, and JavaScript to create like basic websites on the internet. And some of you guys also may have heard of some component frameworks and app frameworks, the most popular being React. How many of you guys have heard of React? Lots of people have heard of React. Okay, cool. So we have component frameworks such as React, Vue, Angular, and we also have some like app frameworks that are built on top of these component frameworks, like Gatsby, Next, Nuxt for Vue. But today we're going to be talking about something that's similar, but in some ways totally different and way better. So that's what all the question marks are for. Svelte. As you guys probably know. But Svelte is another component framework. It does a similar function to React and Vue, but it's way better in like almost every way imaginable. So there's probably a reason that you guys haven't heard of it, or like maybe only a few of you guys have heard of it. And the biggest reason is because it's really, really new. So just to give you guys a little bit of a timeline, Svelte, the component framework, was released in November 2016. The second version of Svelte was released in April 2018, about 2 years later, or I guess 1.5 years later. Svelte 3 was released about a year after that in April. And then in October of 2020, they announced the app framework for Svelte. So that's essentially like the next version of how you can integrate all the functionalities of Svelte into just like the actual way that you make the website. So just the same way that you would use like Next.js for React, you would use SvelteKit for Svelte. It's a bit of a confusing naming because they're very, very similar sounding words. But typically you're going to be using SvelteKit to develop with Svelte because it's built on top of Svelte. Basically, after they announced that in October 2020, they then went into beta in March of 2021. So that's really recent. And it came out of beta this past December. So it's super new. It's finally official though. I know a lot of people have been waiting for SvelteKit to be released for a very long time, and it just has been for about 1.5 months. So I can imagine that the popularity is going to be skyrocketing a lot in the next year or so, and you guys will be hearing more and more of it. Yay! And then me personally, I started developing with Svelte in December of 2021, so a little over a year now, like a little after it went into beta. So like the whole time I was like maybe sounded like a crazy person, like trying to convince people to use Svelte. And now they finally believe me because it's official. But now we're going to answer the question that you guys are probably wondering. It's like, why is Svelte different? Why do we even have Svelte? And why is it worth talking about when we have such a popular tool like React or Vue? So the biggest difference under the hood between Svelte and React is that the way that it is sort of like compiled is very different from traditional app frameworks that we have right now. So tools like React and Vue compile the code at runtime. So that's when you're like accessing the website. And then Svelte instead compiles the code into like really minimal JavaScript, like really, really tiny package sizes at build time. So that's like before you serve, before you deploy the site. which means that it's going to be really, really efficient, really fast, and really simple for the browser to handle. Beyond that, and this might be getting a little bit technical with the React background, but if you guys have learned about it, the way that React works is that there's a virtual DOM or direct object model. And that's sort of just like the hierarchy of all like the elements that are on your screen and stuff when you're on the website. And React and Vue and Angular, I guess, all have this idea called the virtual DOM, which is a mirror of the actual direct object model. And then like when you touch stuff, when you change stuff, when you click buttons, it modifies this mirror and then it syncs up. And then it like relays those changes back to the actual DOM so that those changes persist. So for Svelte, there is no virtual DOM. You can sort of imagine when these two like mirrors are passing information between each other that it can get very, very slow. Like so when you have like too much data to display or you have too much like user interaction going on, these sites can get like laggy, hard for the browser to handle, and all in all, maybe not as fast as you want it to be. Svelte instead, because it is compiled into minimal JavaScript at build time, there is no virtual DOM. When you're interacting with it, you're modifying the actual DOM. So it's really cool. When you develop with it, it feels like really lightweight. And when you're like going on the sites, it feels like really simple, really lightweight. Beyond that, some of the other things on this slide, for reactivity, I think we can maybe briefly visit this website that I have down here called Component Party, which is cool. It just like sort of compares basic functionalities across the different app frameworks. And you can see like, oh, like if I want to manage state in React, it would look like this. If I want to manage state in like Vue, it would look like this. Svelte, it would look like this. And then when we go there, it'll like really highlight maybe like the differences. But yeah, so everything that you want for state management is built right into Svelte. So like you don't have to import anything. You don't even have to like write that much. It honestly feels sort of like English, like the exact way that you would like sort of think about it is like most intuitively put into the code. So I thought that was really cool. If you're like learning Svelte before you learn React and then you learn React after, you're like, there's so much extra stuff that I don't need to write in my code to achieve the same thing. And then, yeah, so similar to maybe like the bottom point that I have on the side, same stuff, less code. Basically, you can create the same effects, do the same functionalities without all of the boilerplate of React in terms of like, I guess, like setting up different like state management or like use effects, all the different hook-based functions. So yeah, really, really straightforward developer user experience. So like when you're using it, you're gonna be like, ah, this is easy. So yay. I guess I'm gonna take a quick detour from the slides and we can look here, just look at a couple quick examples of how Svelte compares to React. So this is a really cool website because as I was saying, you can see they compare like state declarations, updates, computations, and then templating, lifecycle, et cetera, between the two. So like if you know React already and you want to learn Svelte, you can use this website to sort of translate your knowledge and say like, oh, like I know how to do this in React and then I want to do it in Svelte now. So like we can look at an example, just like declaring the state. See, for React, you have to first import use state, and then you have to like set up the component with the export default function and like everything like that. You got to open the brackets. You got to like do the use state. You got to set it to the name. Sometimes you have to like use a setter function and everything like that. And then that's how you put it. But then you see for Svelte up top, because everything with the reactivity is built in, all you have to do is inside of your script tags, you like will write what the variable you want it to be, and then you can directly inject it in the markup. So it's really fun. Other examples, like if you want to update the state, like you can just sort of compare like the complexity of this React code to the complexity of the Svelte code. Basically, the thing that I love about Svelte, especially as somebody who was coming from sort of like a design and maybe like programming fundamentals background and like not like a really like crazy React background. Like obviously I know my React now, but like when I was learning it, I was like, I only like sort of knew React. I was like, this is like way simpler. Like this is how I think. And then it's just like going to the code like that and it works. So like, for example, like updating states, you can see this is like super complicated. And then in Svelte, it's like, you like set the name as a variable and then you can like reset it. And then it's always just going to stay updated in the DOM because there's no like mirror. So yay. And then you guys can sort of explore this further and just sort of like see how they're similar, how they're different. But yeah, coming back to the slides. So even though Svelte is a total baby, it's already used in many places across the internet. So some companies that you might have heard of, such as Alaska Airlines, IBM, Square, so like the phone payment, like Apple Wallet thing, chess.com, Philips, etc., etc. They all use Svelte, so super cool. And I would sort of imagine that in the next maybe like 5 years, a lot of companies are going to be transitioning their websites and rebuilding them in Svelte. So it'll be really fun. And then here is just another example of Svelte in the wild. This is also one of the biggest reasons that I ended up learning about Svelte, is because I'm very interested in like visual storytelling and like data journalism and stuff like that. And Svelte has great applications in these fields because it is so fast, because it is so responsive and so fast. Like if you're serving a lot of data or you have a lot of user interaction, like it's an interactive interface and you're like clicking around doing all sorts of stuff, you want it to be really fast. You want it to feel like you're like playing with physical space. You want it to feel like really fast, really natural. So a lot of like data journalism publications already have been using a ton of Svelte. Two of my favorites being the New York Times and the Pudding. So these three examples at the bottom. Over here on the far right, if you guys remember, I think this was winter of 2020, actually. There was like an AI to judge how bad your Spotify is. So it was like you would put in your Spotify information and they would like have an AI program sort of like roast you and your Spotify taste, like based on like the music that you like that your like account has listened to. So they use Svelte for that. Down here is an example. They did like some like Rick-rolling visualization. And then here is like one of their most recent ones is like visualizing Aztec gods and the things that they symbolize. And then up here at the very top, this is from the New York Times. I worked at the New York Times this past summer on a lot of their like data visualization like publications for the election. And that was really fun because they serve a ton of data for that. The guy who invented Svelte actually used to work at the New York Times, and he invented it because he needed something that was going to be like better than React. So, and then he doesn't work there anymore. He's since left to work on Svelte and Svelte full time for Vercel. But yeah, super cool. I would say maybe like the one drawback right now is probably community support. So because it's such a new tool, like when you use React and you have like a problem or like you like run into a bug, you can almost always Google it and like somebody else has run into that same problem and they can like tell you how to fix it, like what to copy paste into your code. And with Svelte it's a little bit different because it's such a new tool. So oftentimes, like if you run into a problem, first of all, you might be the first person who's ever running into that problem. And second of all, like you're probably going to run into like an open GitHub thread where people are still fixing it. But because it's come out of beta, I would imagine that it's like not going to happen anymore. That's just sort of been my experience with it. But because it's like official now, because SvelteKit 1.0 is released, like, you know, stable releases. So hopefully not as many errors, a lot more community support to come as people sort of start using this tool more. Yay! Okay, so that was sort of like my contextual introduction to Svelte. And the way that I learned it, basically I learned about Svelte because I was really interested in like the Pudding and the New York Times, and I wanted to learn about how I could do the same thing. So I like was stalking them on YouTube and I like found their some like webcasts that they had posted, just like how to code in Svelte, just like them coding in Svelte. And I was like, what the heck is Svelte? And then I like searched up and I learned more about it. But I sort of committed last winter to coding my personal website in Svelte, which is how I ended up learning it for realsies. And something that I found really useful was this link that I'm going to ask you guys to go to right now on your laptops. So svelte.dev/tutorial. We're going to have a little bit of lab time. And this website was so helpful. I learned like pretty much everything that I needed to know about Svelte here. I read the documentation, obviously, and then this is just like sort of like interactive documentation where they're like teaching you the stuff that you need to know, like sort of in order. So yeah, really cool. I'm gonna walk us through maybe a couple of the core functionalities and we can see how they work in practice. But if you guys are interested in Svelte, hopefully this like inspires, piques your interest. I would highly recommend maybe going through these one by one and just like learning from them, seeing like how all of the different tools and like functions within Svelte are like illustrated. So yay, we're gonna travel back to Chrome. And we're gonna start here, I think. Okay, and then so basically we're gonna go through some of these, and you can see here's like the navigation. So they start with the introduction. So like dynamic attributes, styling, nested components. Maybe we'll start up here. Making an app, I don't know. But then they go into reactivity. So that's like the highlight of Svelte is like how it updates so fast and so seamlessly. And then it goes into, I guess, like the logic and how that's implemented in Svelte. The events in Svelte, bindings, which are really cool, lifestyle functions, and then et cetera, et cetera. So yay. Actually, we can start here. Or let's start in styling. So that I can just sort of highlight the layout of a Svelte file. So the way that Svelte works is basically all of your JavaScript, HTML, and CSS are all going to be in one file. So with SvelteKit, it's file system-based routing. So you're going to have like your like home folder for the site, and then it'll be called like routes. And then you can have like a file for each page that you have, and then each file for that page is going to have all of your HTML, all of your CSS, all of your JavaScript. So here you can see they're just sort of like talking about how you can add styles to the page. But essentially you would have like your script up here, like above the HTML, and then you would have the HTML, and then you would have the styles. So yeah, very simple. Like if you know other web app frameworks, the developer experience is very similar. It's just like without a lot of the boilerplate code. So now we can sort of move on to maybe one of the more fun and unique parts of Svelte. I would say like one of the most characteristic things that you're going to see is like the $ here. So about reactivity, basically you can declare reactive variables such as like for here, I'm just going to click the show me. But basically whenever, if you do a reactive declaration like this, like $ doubled equals count times 2, then whenever count changes, doubled is always going to change too. And so then you can like even just like begin to think about how you would do this in React. Like you got to keep track of the count variable, you got to keep track of the doubled variable. That's like already like maybe like 5-6 lines of code. And here everything is about shorthand, everything is about sort of like minimizing the parts that you understand into a way that's like really easy to skim, really easy to read, and really easy to understand. So yeah, yay. And then you can see like here they just have you using it directly in your markup. So like, you can click it. Oh, it works. That's so fun. Next, we can also look at like statements. So you can see here, for example, we can log the value of count whenever it changes. So I like for like React, you would have to use like a use effect, but here you could say like, just like whenever count changes, I want to run this statement again. So you can see like you can put it in front of if statements. So like whenever the count changes, you could check the if statement again and maybe run the code if you want to run it. You can group them. You can run functions. So you can like put a like variable name and then you put a comma and you put the function name. And then whenever that variable changes, it's going to run the function. So super, super fun. It's like everything that you're like thinking is just like in the code automatically. And then here we have updating arrays and objects. So okay, this is probably not that useful. Does anybody have any questions so far? No? Does anybody think Svelte is, raise your hand if you think Svelte is really fun. Yeah! Yay! Cool. I guess I'm just gonna highlight a few more and then maybe we can talk about how to start an app. I guess this is sort of like a very short workshop, but I think you'll have the most fun probably exploring all of these small things on your own. And then obviously you guys can ask me any questions that you have. So here we have basically your if statements are gonna go in the the markup. So this is like conditional rendering. So like you can use like variables. You can say like, oh, like if this variable is true, then you can show it. Otherwise, don't show it. They have, you know, else if blocks, very simple, like very similar to a lot of other coding frameworks. So you see you have your ifs, your else ifs, your else's. So a lot of this is just like a little bit of a syntax translation. Beyond that, we have like iterator blocks. So I'm gonna click this, you can see what it looks like. Wow. So that each block allows you to iterate over lists. Hopefully you guys are following along. But basically, like let's say you have an array called cats. So you can do like each cats as cat, and then you can sort of render whatever you want. So like, for example, here we have like the famous cats of YouTube, and they're just sort of like, yeah, so they're iterating over this list of objects where there's an ID and there's a name, and then they're using that to down here then generate the hyperlink. So they're using like the name, so they're like iterating over this array of objects, and they're displaying the name and then like linking it to the YouTube video based on the ID. So super fun, iterable blocks. There's keyed each blocks. So this fun thing is like you can see over here each things as thing, and then in parentheses you have thing.id, which is the unique identifier, and then this allows you to sort of modify things in the list of each block without like changing everything else. So like for example, remove first thing. Whoa, so fun. Yeah, and then other fun things. Inline handlers. Let's look at that. So this is very, very similar to React, actually. It's like just like a very slight syntax change. So you can see like on click or like on mouse move, on mouse over, on hover, etc., etc. Yeah. So, whoa, you can do it in one line. And then like you can say like, oh, on mouse move, then you can write out this arrow function where it takes the event and then it moves the mouse. And then, wow, so fun. Okay. Would you guys prefer to keep looking at more of these, or would you guys prefer to do something else? Okay, we'll look at like one more. Let's look at text inputs. I'll just highlight a few more from each section. So this is really fun because you can instantly bind like form values and input values. So like, let's say I like change this to so it's like an input element, and then I'm binding the value of it to the name variable. So you see, I'm setting it up here in my script, and then I'm using the bind value so that whenever this changes down here, it changes name. So you can see like I'm displaying hello name, but then as soon as I type here, it's like automatically different. It's changed. Crazy stuff. HackSC. Hackers. Whoa. So fast. So cool. Beyond that, there's also good ways to sort of component bindings. Bam. So you can see here you can pass like binded values to like a parent component, and then it's like child components. So that's really fun. You can pass data back and forth through like props in the components. Yay. Wow. Nice. So you see now this is very similar to the text input one, but we've sort of created like a sub component. So you can see here how instead of it being an input tag, we now have it as a keypad component that's like a child of this page. And then in here we have a event dispatcher, and we can sort of send this information back and forth, which is really cool. Yay! And then a lot of these other things. They have a lot of really cool built-in transitions. So there's like fade, fly, blur, etc. And then you can like set up page transitions. You can have things move in and out. So like you can see like you can put it on this paragraph tag. So like now when I check it, oh, just kidding. Maybe it won't work. Never mind. That's okay. But like you can have it, just kidding. Maybe it won't work. But typically when you develop it with it in your app, it's gonna work. It'll like fly and it'll like do whatever you want it to do. So we can just look at these code blocks over here where you can sort of set like the Y, so like that's the position where it's coming from, and then the duration, like that's how long the animation is gonna take. So yeah, we could try. Will this work? Never mind. Okay. Typically, I think when you do it on your computer, it might work. But in general, that's sort of how you would do it. Yay. And then you can also write your own custom CSS transitions. So here you can see they've sort of written their own thing. So they like rewrote the fade themselves. So they have the delay, the duration, and then they have like the CSS. So they're like doing the transition between like from 0 to like whatever opacity you want it to be. And then you can also write your own custom JavaScript transitions. Yay. Yeah. And then, oh, other fun things. These are slots. So this is under component composition, if you guys want to know like where I am in the tutorial. But as they've written, just like elements can have children, so can components. So like, let's say you have like a baby component inside of your page and you want to have like, let's say it's like a box and you want like text. So here we have app.svelte in this upper corner, and then we have another file, box.svelte. So obviously, you don't want it to just be like props. Like that would get like a little bit long. Like if you had to do like box and then inside of the tags, you were like heading equals, and then you put like quotes, you're like, oh, hello. Or like you had to put like all the text that you want in the box. So here you can directly sort of inject it. So whoa. Yeah. So like these are slots basically. So here we can see what's happening on the inside. So on the outside, it looks very similar to like maybe if you're using like Theme UI or something, where you have like the component tags and you can put whatever you want inside. And then inside, all we have is the slot tags, which is essentially saying like anything that's inside of the tags in the outer page, we want to sort of inject it into where the slot tags are. So that's really fun. You can like sort of render whatever you want inside of the box. Yay! Yeah. And then everything else is maybe like, you can take a look at it. I think those are maybe some of the essentials. So I think the context for Svelte is really important because obviously like when you're developing, or like when I was learning it, like it's really simple. Like for the user that's developing, like it almost feels like nothing. But then like there's, I guess like when you compare it to like the React development experience, you start to realize sort of like how much is like happening under the hood and like how different it really is from how we're developing right now. So yeah, I would say that probably concludes my talking portion of this. I definitely encourage you guys to sort of come up, ask me any questions you have. I think this is the final page I'm going to show. So making an app, this is under introduction. So if you want to play with it like in your actual code, you want to set up like a workspace for Svelte, you can go into your command line interface and type like npm create svelte at latest and then like the name of your app, and then it'll sort of set up like a skeleton project for you, and you can like type in whatever you want. So yay, super fun. So you guys can do that right now if you want, and just sort of play around, maybe make something. Even if you don't use Svelte for your hackathon project this time, I hope that you give it a shot in the future. If you do it this time, you have a special place in my heart. You are my personal MVP, my hero. So I hope you guys have a good night. Ask me any questions you have. Yeah. Thank you.